Started here shortly. We're already after the 1 p.m. start time. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of you to the second meeting of the Joint Committee of Transportation for the 2023 interim. Before we call roll, I would remind everyone to please silence your phones before we begin. Also, all the meeting materials for today's meeting are currently available on the Transportation Committee page on the LRC website. Before we call the roll, is there anybody that has any special guests that'd like to recognize that's here today? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, if you call the roll, please.
Senator Berg. Present. Senator Carpenter. Senator Mills. Senator Smith. Here. Senator Storm. Senator Turner. Here. Senator Wheeler. Senator Williams. Here. Senator Wilson. Senator Yates. Present. Representative Branscombe.
Here.
Representative Bridges. Here. Representative Dixon. Representative Elliott. Here. Representative Fleming. Representative Hale.
Here.
Representative Heverin. Here. Representative Herron. Representative Hodgson. Here. Representative Huff.
Here.
Representative Imes.
Here.
Representative Lewis. Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Neighbors. Representative Palumbo. Representative Roberts. Representative Smith. Here. Representative Tackett Lafferty. Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative Upchurch.
Present.
Representative Wesley.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Co-Chair Higdon.
Here.
Chairman Blanton.
Here. It appears we do have a quorum for today's meeting. And before we get into our guest speakers today, we will need approval of the January 6th meeting minutes. If I could get a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Motion made by Senator Smith. Do I hear a second? Second by Representative Heverin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed may object. Hearing none, motion will stand as read. And we've got a pretty robust agenda today, but we are, if you have a copy of today's agenda, we are going to make a slight adjustment. And since Secretary Gray is here for 3 of the first parts of the agenda, we're going to move the work zone safety up and begin with it because we got some of our engineers from across the state here, and we want to get them their opportunity to come and speak, and then get them on the roads back to their districts because they've traveled a long way. So with that, we're going to begin with work zone safety. As Secretary Gray, if you could bring your folks, and we'll get started. Mr. Secretary, if you and your guests could introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Gray, and this is a fellow that most of you all know, Kenny Bishop, our legislative director. And let me first, don't go yet, Kenny. Hold on, time out. Let me introduce, let me say greetings to everybody here. I always enjoy being with you all, and I particularly always want to say at the very outset, thank you for your public service. And I mean that genuinely. And that's the same way I feel about the folks in the Transportation Cabinet, myself, and I will thank them. In fact, I want to start out by, and Mr. Chairman, you said that we've got a number of our chief district engineers here today. And I want to start out by recognizing each and every one of them. I'm going to ask Joe Plunk and Denitra Henderson from districts 2 and 3 to join us in just a minute. But in addition to our chiefs from District 2 and 3, we have Chief District Engineers Matt Bullock, Kelly Baker, Chris Jones, and Bob Yeager here. So we have fully half of the Chief District Engineers from around the state representing more than 1,500 employees. And why that's important is this subject is so important to them that they wanted to be here. Also, I want to recognize Deputy Secretary Mike Hancock, State Highway Engineer James Ballinger, and others are going to join me in other parts of our presentation today, and I will introduce them when we get there. So I do want to lead off today, Chairman, with a subject that literally has life and death implications, and that's the subject of work zone safety, an issue that I know looms very large for members of this committee as well. I can tell you that it never drops off our radar at the Transportation Cabinet. And I want to begin, this is where Kenny was getting ahead of his skis a minute ago, but we want to begin, this is a very serious message and a very serious subject. And we want to begin with a short video testimonial. So Kenny, if you'll start it up, thank you.
I can't put you out here in my position, but I can kind of tell you what it is that we do.
Can you turn it up?
I was flagging on Route 2 in Greenup County. At that time, I worked maintenance. We had a gentleman that I seen coming at me, and he wasn't slowing down at about a couple hundred yards away, and he wasn't really paying attention to what he was doing. I yelled on the radio and let my crew know that we was going to have a runner. As he proceeded closer, I jumped across the guardrail. Being 5'6" and 220 pounds, that's not something you take feet first. It's head first over a guardrail, so it was interesting. It's just simple people not paying attention. In different occurrences, you can talk to somebody, they may tell you, well, I worked 10 minutes into my lunch, so I'm in a hurry. I would say 6 in 10 cars, you're going to see somebody looking down. It's cell phones. If everybody understood what it is that we see, they would probably change their ways of doing things. You know, I've got a daughter at home, I've got a wife at home, and we're out here to help you. We're out here to make your roads better. When you see the orange signs or maybe yellow signs, pink signs, just simply slow down and pay attention to what's going on in the roadway, because there's going to be workers present. So if you could do that, everybody's going to go home safe at the end of the day.
All right, thank you, Kenny. You know, what Sean just shared with us has impact to everyone who works with the cabinet and all of the contractors who are working through the cabinet on our projects. Highway construction goes on, of course, year-round. Work zones can be found anywhere at any time, but especially this time of the year in the summer, because that's when so much of our resurfacing work is done. Right now, we have hundreds of projects underway, from the Mississippi to the Big Sandy. That means a driver is practically guaranteed to encounter a work zone at some point. Work zones are not confined to transportation projects. Work zones can be set up by utility crews, mowing contractors, that is, anyone who's working on or around a highway. So to talk more about this, I'm going to be joined by Deputy State Highway Engineer Jason Sawala, who is Executive Director of our Office of Highway Safety. So Jason, you're familiar with a lot of folks here, so I'll just let you, let me, also joining us are 2 of our frontline team members. That's Joe Plunk, who is our Chief District Engineer in the Bowling Green District 3, and Denitra Henderson, District 2, the Chief District Engineer of our Madisonville District. So Joe and Denitra came today to share their stories of their own employees in work zones. So I'm going to let them have my chair.
Thank you all, and welcome to our committee. If you'll introduce yourselves before you speak, you may begin.
Yes, Jason Sawala, Deputy State Highway Engineer, KYTC. I'm Denitra Henderson. I'm the district engineer in the District 2 office in Madisonville.
Joe Plunk, Chief District Engineer for KYTC's District 3 based in Bowling Green.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I really appreciate being able to come and speak with you on this important topic again today. And we've had the opportunity to do so in several other sessions and situations, but wanted to reiterate that this continues to be a serious challenge for those out there on the roadways conducting the work. As the Secretary said, there's a lot of road work going on right now, and so when you think about this, in 2022 we had 1,083 crashes in work zones that were reported, which resulted in 5 fatalities and numerous injuries. And not all of those obviously are workers. In fact, a very small percentage. However, it's really important as we think about what it is that we do out there on the roadway. Like Sean mentioned in his video, we're out there doing work for everybody who drives and travels and lives in Kentucky. And so it's really important that the folks that are out there doing that work, whether they be KYTC employees or those of our contractors or partners, are able to do so safely. Another thing Sean mentioned in his video was that he anecdotally sees a lot of folks looking down. While distracted driving crashes are underreported typically in crash data, just over 40% over the last several years of these work zone crashes involve some form of distraction. And so just to lend credence to what Sean said. And I'm going to get out of the way now and let Joe and Denitra share some experiences from their district. So again, we very much appreciate the opportunity.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Plunk again from District 3, KYTC's District 3, which covers South Central Kentucky, based out of Bowling Green. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of our employee experiences related to work zone safety. I'll be brief, but I have 2 main points I want to leave with you. First, based on personal accounts from our frontline workers, there is a growing trend of work zone encroachments. So motorists encroaching the work zone, putting KYTC and contractor employees at even greater risk than they already assume. And second, there is a lack of ability to enforce these work zone protections, as work zone violations are treated just like any other traffic violation. In other words, the individual must be, quote, caught in the act. Just a few months ago, we were here on the Capitol grounds. Secretary Gray and others recognized the National Work Zone Awareness Safety Campaign. District 3's own Tyler Bullington, a highway maintenance employee from Allen County, was here, and he recounted his experience. I'll do my best to try to share in his words what happened in November of 2020. Tyler was working as a flagger for our Allen County crew. The rest of the crew was just downstream. They were doing some slope mowing operations. That's basically cutting back vegetation from the rural roadway. Tyler was there monitoring the flagging station. A motorist passed no less than a half dozen work zone ahead, flagger ahead signs, and was essentially a runner. Passed Tyler up. Tyler ran up to try to get the motorist's attention. The motorist did stop. Tyler was communicating with the motorist. He was going to try to find a gap to where he could get the motorist on through. Tyler turned his back, was communicating with his partner flagger on the other end of the work zone. The motorist, for some reason, put the vehicle in reverse, backed into Tyler at such great force that it threw Tyler about 10 feet into the ditch. Tyler was transported by ambulance to the local hospital. When local law enforcement came to investigate the incident, we were told at the time that because they didn't witness the incident, that there was no citation that could be written up. So the motorist went about his day, and Tyler, who has young children, he's in his early 30s, he now was off work for about 4 months, and even today as a young man has a diminished mobility because of these injuries suffered nearly 3 years ago. In Logan County, about 10 months later, September 2021, a similar traffic work zone set up. The crew was working on a drainage improvement, and you know what, we never want to stop traffic any longer than we must. At times it is unavoidable, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, at most 15 minutes. This motorist came to a complete stop, waited at the flagging station with the flagger, and for whatever reason decided that she had better things to do and decided to encroach into the work zone, putting employees at risk. Two of our employees, David Hurt and Wendell Sanford, tried to approach the vehicle and communicate to the driver that she needed to stop. She did not. She struck both employees. Those employees were knocked to the ground. They were older gentlemen. No serious injuries, thankfully, but they did have cuts and bruises and were away from work for a few days. Again, the same story. Law enforcement comes out, investigate. Even though we had the vehicle's make, model, color, and license plate, law enforcement said there was really nothing they could do. They didn't witness the incident, and that motorist went about their day, and we have two employees that had injuries from that. Logan County, that same crew, experienced that same situation about 3 weeks ago. I could certainly go on and on. Even contractor employees are at risk. Just last summer, Reynolds Contracting, Striping, they were conducting a mobile operation on Interstate 165, that's the Natcher Expressway, and that's an operation where they're closing one lane. They have a truck crash attenuator following the operation, and even with all of the signage, the active work zone, barrels, reduced speed limit, a vehicle came through, an 18-wheeler came through and struck the back end of that crash attenuator and killed the contractor employee. So these situations go on. I want to read something that my last point I want to leave with you is we had a work zone encroachment just about 10 days ago, or right after 4th of July that week, and in Todd County, very similar situation. Thankfully, no one was injured. But the superintendent, David Blake, he wrote this in the report. People do not pay the state worker any attention when we work roadways. The public is always in a hurry, and the state worker is always causing them delay to their destination. They drive through on their phones. They have no concern for the state worker whatsoever. We need support to help protect the state worker as we perform a job that provides the public with a safe road to travel on. I'm here to share their story, and I appreciate your listening to my those experiences just now. Ms. Henderson, I know, has very similar experiences to share with you.
Thank you, Joe. So, Denitra Henderson, I am in the District 2 area in Madisonville. And again, we have 4 other chief district engineers behind us that can share the exact same stories. And these are our employees. These are executive cabinet employees that Joe and I and all the chief district engineers, and especially Secretary Gray, and I can't name everyone behind me, but we all feel personally responsible for their safety while they're at work. And I appreciate Secretary Gray's attention to safety, not just employee safety, but then again, roadway safety. And this all ties in together. So I just have a couple recent examples, and then I will go into some long-term effects of our employees because of our work zone safety situation. So a few months ago when we started our mowing season in Owensboro along the bypass, it's a bypass that was previously 55 miles per hour. A lot of people drove quicker than that, and at some point the speed limit was raised to 65 miles per hour at local insistence, and now everyone, as you can imagine, drives faster than that. So it is a very tricky place to do roadway maintenance, including our mowing. And at the beginning of our mowing season, we had a litter pickup employee that it was his first day on the job, and a lady did not see the merge signage and went off into the median because she could not merge and struck this employee and killed him. His first day on the job. And so on yesterday, even more recently, that same mowing contractor, one of his tractors was crossing, again, the Owensboro bypass, and a lady was driving a pickup truck and couldn't see, was looking down, and she hit the tractor and demolished the tractor and the bush hog that was on the bypass crossing from one side of a bridge to another. Thankfully, yesterday, no one was injured, but these are just 2 very recent incidents, one of them including a fatality that will be included in next year's statistics when we start talking about the number of 2023 statistics. This litter employee will be one of the people. And so it's not easy for us, but we typically start looking at the data and the numbers, and we have these charts, and we're up 2 or down 3. These are people, and that contractor had to call this gentleman's wife and tell him he wasn't coming home that day. And as a chief district engineer, I've also had to make that call for one of our employees who had an incident while he was working for us. And so also something I want to iterate more than just particular incidents, because I think all of the chief district engineers could give you very recent and very distant incidents, is the impact that the fear of a work zone collision while they're out working, the impact this has on our employees and their mental health. We recently had a superintendent meeting, a training last week, and during the break I caught some of them in the hallway, and they were coincidentally talking about some incidents that had happened while they were working. But before I could ask, well, how long ago was that? Someone else did. And some of the incidents that they were recalling were 8 and 10 years old. And it doesn't leave them, because then as a superintendent, again, they're not just worried about themselves, but they're also worried about the employees that they're putting out there every day to do the routine maintenance work that we take for granted. So again, I want to end with just asking anything you can do to increase the safety of our employees, and any work zone employee is critical. So Mr. Doug Frient is the owner of the company that experienced the employee fatality a few months ago, and then again the tractor hit yesterday. And he called me this morning on my way here, and I told him, I said, I heard about your incident. And he said, thank goodness no one was hurt. But he said if there's anything you all can do to help, he wanted to ticket drivers somehow for driving carelessly through the work zones. He is just also, I'm asking on his behalf and our employees' behalf and all of our contractors, if there's anything we can do to raise awareness, then we would appreciate all the efforts. So thank you again for giving us opportunity.
In conclusion, I would just say that, as Denitra said, all of these incidents that we talked about, that's a very small number of what we see overall in the work zones day in and day out and year in and year out. And so as we continue at KYTC to continue to improve work zone safety through whatever mechanisms possible, and we've been here talking about work zone safety campaigns and various other things. We're just thankful for the opportunity to be here again to speak about this very important topic and highlight its importance not only to our staff and our partners, but to everybody who travels the roads in Kentucky. So thank you.
Jason, thank you. Mr. Bell, Ms. Henderson, thank you. And to all you district engineers that are here today, and I share your concerns. I have been working for, I guess, 3 years now with Jason on a piece of legislation that some people cringe about because we use the word cameras, but it's not about cameras, it's about protecting lives. Is that the answer that's going to protect the lives? I don't know, but we got to try something, right? Mine came about from a young neighbor of mine that was working for a road contractor by the name of Jared Helton that was killed, unfortunately, at a very young age. It's about providing a protected workplace because they're doing things that benefits us. And unfortunately, I'm learning that some of this highway safety issue stuff it's a cultural issue. People just got so used to driving, using their phone, ignoring signs. And I mean, just this morning on the way in, when I came through Lexington to what I call the interchange there was 6475, traffic's not even driving close to what the posted recommended speed limit is. And we just got back from SLC, and the wife went down with me, and we're traveling through work zones, and she's like, they're driving faster in the work zones than they are when they come out of the work zones because you was going to get run over. And she was right. People were taking no regards for those men and women that were working there. And I thought part of our goals is to protect people throughout the Commonwealth and certainly our employees and those that we contract with. And we owe it to them. So I thank you all for bringing this today. If cameras aren't the answer, give me something that is. I'm not married to cameras. I'm married to finding safety for our workers in our work zones. Provide me something that we can do to create a safer work environment for them. Those people have families just like we do. And I guarantee you that if your family's in there, you're going to slow down when you come to a work zone. We just are. And we've got to change the culture. Now, Mr. Bell, to address before I turn it over to questions from some of the other legislators, I will say this. Law enforcement isn't totally wrong in what they're telling you. It's the way our laws are in Kentucky. There's usually just 2 or 3 traffic things that someone could be cited for. However, without witness it, they can follow up with an investigation. They can follow up with an investigation and obtain summonses or warrants for these people. To just leave you hanging high and dry is a disappointment, in my opinion. They should have followed up. That's what their job is. So that is something that could be done. So I've got a couple questions, and this is dealing with the way we currently do with our double fines in our work zones. And by the way, while I was at the conference, I met with Columbia Gas with the same issues with their utility workers, with concerns when they're out here and people ignoring the signs. And it's a danger. But double fines, what is a double fine in Kentucky in a work zone? How much does that cost? Minus the court cost now. How much does that cost?
I don't have the specific statute in front of me, but it's a relatively small portion. As you mentioned, the court cost is a lot of the cost of what you would consider to be a speeding or a traffic citation, and so the actual fine portion of that is usually a relatively small portion of the of that overall cost. And what happens in Kentucky with those doubled fines is that they go into a restricted fund to be able to support law enforcement within work zones to try and prevent crashes and poor outcomes from folks that are violating the law within work zones, sir.
Okay, so it's been 2009 probably since I read through those statutes when I was reading through for my promotional exams. Unless they've changed, Mr. Representative Williams or some of you that are attorneys on the committee, at the time, the actual fine was just $1 per mile over. I don't know if that's changed or not. And then your big cost was your court cost, which I think is up around $145 now. So let's say you're running 20 miles over. That's $20 plus your court cost $145. That's $165. Well, do they double just the fine of $20 to $40? Is that all they're doing? Then it's not going to be effective. And my next question is going to be, do we know how many of these citations are being dismissed around this state by judges in work zones? They shouldn't be allowed to dismiss a citation unless there's some type of evidence that it was issued improperly so that we get the full effect. That's some things we can talk about. I'm looking at these other states that I'm going through down to SLC, and they have penalties up to $500. Do we want to get serious about highway safety? Maybe that's some things we can come to an agreement on. If we can't come to an agreement on cameras, let's start making it hurt to where it hurts us the most. That's in our wallet. Maybe that'll grab some people's attentions. But we got to take this stuff serious. So that's just a few things. I'd like to know what our penalty is for speeding in a work zone. And I think we need to double everything that you could be charged with. You could be charged with reckless driving in a work zone. If you're driving recklessly, you don't even have to be driving excessively speeding, but you can be driving recklessly and be charged with it. And then let's see how many are dismissed around this state. Maybe our media friends could look into some of that for us. Find out how many of these citations in work zones are being dismissed because people's lives are at stake. So, do you have any response, anybody at the table?
Just that we would be happy to look into some of those things and provide you responses. I apologize for not having those available.
No, you didn't know I was going to ask those questions. So with that, I think the first person is Representative Heverin has a question.
Thank you, Chairman Blanton. The last 2 committees I've been in, my name's been butchered, so I appreciate you saying it correctly the second time.
Sorry.
For all the people in the room sending the text, we do know my last name is Heffron.
Yes, yes, we do.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming to present today. Highway safety has been an issue of importance since I got elected. Of course, I have Scotty's in my district, but then I've also been working, probably for the past year, working with them and Reynolds and the Highway Contractor Association to figure out how we find out how we can best protect our highway safety people. It's a very dangerous job. Just coming up today from Litchfield, I went through 2 work zones and being slow. And, I think sometimes I was talking to one of the highway contractors, and he was saying he got a call from somebody saying his drivers were just driving really slow, and someone called upset about it. He's like, well, I think you were behind a rolling roadblock. And she's like, oh, no, I wasn't. He's like, no, you were. And so I think sometimes, like, we as individuals don't educate ourselves, when we see somebody on the road, it's not the first instinct that we think of, and we need to get that way. So I appreciate you all bringing it. My question is, as I've been having conversation with the highway contractors on highway safety, something that I've started to think about is how we can partner with local sheriff's office or local police offices, because we know that KSP, they're already so spreadly thin, or they're thinly spread, whatever. There are not enough of them to go around the entire state to do that. And so how can we partner with our local people to make sure that we can do that? Because I think that's something that wouldn't have to be in law necessarily. It wouldn't have to be a statute, and it's something that we can do now. So building the partnerships, is there a way? And I know that local law enforcement is also spread thin, but, is there a way that we can contract with them to get them out? Because I do think the one thing that we all know is blue lights slow you down. And if someone in this room says they've never slowed down when they've seen blue lights, they're full of it. I always slow down at least. And so, have you all had conversations with local police officers in counties or local sheriff's offices to see if, they would... I know highway contractors can't have blue lights, and that's a whole nother conversation we won't get into. But in the meantime, what can we do immediate? Can you all partner with them? Or even like with the speed trap zones? I thought about this the other day. By my mom's house, there was it tells you how fast you're going, and there's lights on top of it. Is that something that you all could partner with to use those in work zone areas?
I want to be clear that law enforcement is a great partner with KYTC. So all of these examples, KSP and local law enforcement, they're there when they absolutely can be. But like you said, they are spread thin. They can't be everywhere at once. The challenge really is, regardless of the penalty, is how are we going to enforce compliance when a law enforcement officer isn't there on scene? So I'll use the example of there are thousands of school buses on the roads every morning during the school year. A law enforcement officer isn't following all of those, but however, there is means for a school bus driver to report a violation of a stop arm. I'm not exactly sure how, but maybe that is a camera. Maybe that is just the word of the school bus driver. But there is a way, without the law enforcement officer being there, to report those violations. To me, that's the challenge. But otherwise, yes, to answer your question, they are a great partner when they can be there, and there's just a limit to what they can do.
I would like to see, and I would love to continue this conversation. I know Kentuckians for Better Transportation has been involved too. I think originally when I reached out to the cabinet, I didn't get a response on being the partner with that, but I know I also didn't talk to Secretary Gray or Mike about it. Deputy Secretary. It's a conversation I would like to be included in. I know it's something I brought to Chairman Blanton as well. I understand that they are good partners. I think our law enforcement is wonderful. I just think in the meantime, what can we do better to do that? And with the highway contractors, it's different with the state, I think, but can the highway contractors pay the local sheriff's offices or the local police departments to have a body out there? Because we do need to come up with something in the meantime. And even if it's not a long-term fix, it could still save a life, because all the work zones I went through today, I think I went two on the Parkway and one in Clarkson. There was nothing there. There were barrels, but there were no police or blue lights. And I do think that there's something there. I would just like to continue to have the conversation, probably just not in committee about it. But I think we need to figure out. I'm afraid that we're going to keep trying to have this conversation and nothing's going to get done and more people are going to get killed because we can't come to an agreement. And so what can we do in the meantime to come up with a short-term solution while we figure out the long-term solution? So thank you.
Senator Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I sit here, my other hat is a personal injury lawyer, and there's not a year that goes by that I don't have a death case because of distracted, reckless driving, and usually a lot of the death cases are on our highways. So I watched the video. I was waiting to cringe because I thought there'd be a different result, and I appreciate that because that's usually what you hear. That's what I see, and I've put together synopsis videos over the years. We know our KSP are thin, and we also know that we have the ability to free up resources with at least some type of the camera system. And I'm looking through the automated speed cameras in work zones keeps getting adopted by more and more states. And the idea is whether or not we're really serious about enforcing it or not. Obviously, we're not, because we have the ability to make sure that there is accountability. I know politically it can be a tough one. I kind of tout on restricted government in a lot of ways, but our top priority is public safety. And every time I have another victim, and they are victims, come in my office, another father they're burying, and I know that we have failed to act. So I'm watching state after state do the pilot programs, and they're showing they work, they slow things down. I know my colleague, Senator Thomas, has filed several bills in the past, and I think it can be restrictive. And we can do that on a way that whether or not even the first time is simply a warning that comes out. But the question was asked, as far as enforcing our tickets that we have now. As a former, I worked in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, was the AG's office before. The Commonwealth has the burden of proof. So we get in there, a lot of times we're the ones taking away that proof. Do you realize that? We're the ones that are doing that. We have the ability. So let's put the cameras up there. A good defense attorney may or may not be able to win that, but it will, because the reason we know it works is because it's worked all over the nation. So I think that we can talk and we can all say that we care, but what we do with our actions shows our priorities. And if we don't pass a pilot program, if we don't put that forward and vote yes, then we've actually voiced where we stand. So the next person that dies, the next person that is injured severely for the failure of us to act, that's on us. And I'm a member of this body and this committee, and I can tell you we failed to move forward. I think there has to be restrictions. I think there has to be oversight. I think there could be huge implications for abuse, but we can write this pilot program in a way that has that proper oversight, and I'm hoping that we move forward and do so. Especially our KSP people, we're asking them to come sit and ticket people when we need them all over the place. Why wouldn't we free up those bodies by putting just in the work zones those temporary cameras? Thank you.
Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm like everybody else. I'm not going to repeat anything they said, or try not to anyway, but appreciate everything you all are doing. I just find that there's one help that would help, in my opinion, is signage. They've been doing all kinds of things in Harlan. They've got the little sign that flashes. People slow down for it and obey it. Nobody's even there. The guys that's got the farm tractors ought to have a truck that's got a flashing light sitting where they start. People then take notice. If you got a constable sitting with a blue light at them things, people slow down. But not having proper signage, that section down below Richmond there, it was for 10 days, nobody was there except the barrels and things, and there was nobody there, but you had those two narrow lanes, and everybody was driving, 70 miles an hour. And if you put those cameras up, that's going to be the problem. You see, but there was no signs, and I've complained to the department about this. 1/2 mile from where that work began, it says merge left. And every 3 lanes is going like this. If you all can't come up with something, I would suggest that we legislatively say 5 miles from where there's a work zone, that there be a sign saying merge left ahead, not just work ahead, slow down ahead. Because those people, that's where you see those accidents too. Scares me going from here to Harlan. We had that problem down on the Lexington Bridge. Signage is a good thing for the public. I'm all for what Mr. Chairman said. Make it, I don't find ever that there's a work zone, and I've been practicing law a long time, work zone speed limit dismissed. Make them prepayable for all these people's out of state, and if you want to charge them $100 or $150, and put that sign up. I've traveled a lot of states like everybody. When you see that work sign that says minimum fine, $200 or whatever it is, some people slow down. And so there's a many ways, but signage is a great help to the need of what we have. And you see some of these workers are in little businesses are doing plenty of signage. The one that did that section below Lexington, I'm down near Richmond, didn't do the proper signage in my opinion. And it's a miracle. I don't know how many accidents you had there, but the signage was terrible. So that would be something that I think could help right up front. And court costs is about $157, I think. And if you make the penalty another and just let all these people from out of state pay that, you can mail it in because they're not going to come back to court. But make that signage. But put no signs up and saying you're going to pay a $250 plus court cost. It slows people down. It's that notice in front that you're going to do that will help, I believe. And I know it's a problem to put signs up and take them down, but shouldn't be. They're just orange and you can move them in and out. So that's, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we can work on something. I'd be more glad to work on something of that nature.
Well, thank you all. This has certainly been an interesting topic of conversation, much needed, and I think it's one we will continue as we move forward. Representative Bridges.
I'll make this brief. I know you've had a lot of suggestions today and a lot of concern, but I just want to brag on you for a minute. Down in the western part of the state where 24 goes into Illinois, there was work zones, but it was in Illinois, not in Kentucky. But we had, as many of you are aware, we had several deaths and things. And I just want to say thank you for the way you work, not only with the state police, but with the local governments, the counties and cities. And I think we were one of the only interstates that had speed bumps put in place for a short period of time. And I just want to brag on you and say thank you for addressing that quickly and swiftly. We had multiple accidents, several deaths for a short period of time, and the way you got on top of that, we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. As I was saying, it's a conversation we need to move forward with, but we need to move forward with quickly. Be ready by session to come up with something that's going to provide some protection for our workers out there. Thank you to all of our district engineers that are here today, not just for being here today, but for what you do day in, day out. No doubt you hear a lot of grumbling from the public, and I get it. And we thank you for all your hard work and effort that you and your crews back in your districts do every day for us here in the Commonwealth. We thank you. So moving forward to the next, we will begin with the Eastern Kentucky flood cleanup, and looks like we have Secretary Gray and the Assistant State Highway Engineer John Moore with us today. Gentlemen, welcome, and when you get ready, if you'll state your name for the record, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's Jim Gray. And I want to first thank you for acknowledging our chiefs, just district engineers, and all the employees just now, Representative Blanton. And it's really gratifying. I will say this before we shift over to the flood recovery, but it's very gratifying to hear the support that these employees get routinely from many of you all, because you do engage and interact with them a lot, with our chiefs as well as many of our employees and the managers on the front line. So our next topic, we're going to pivot over and bring you up to date on the Cabinet's efforts toward the continuing recovery of the Eastern Kentucky from the devastating floods of almost 1 year ago. Now, significant strides have been made, but there's still a long way yet to go, of course. And I'm joined today by Deputy State Highway Engineer John Moore, who will introduce himself as well. John is serving as the project manager of our recovery response and has done an extraordinary job from the very beginning. John's authority includes the massive undertaking of the removal and disposal of the debris that the floodwaters left behind. Now, as I think most of you probably know, it runs into the hundreds of thousands of tons. John will give us some of those facts and figures in just a minute, and he will also be talking about our efforts to repair and replace damaged roads and bridges. Now, also with us today, and I mentioned this earlier, is State Highway Engineer James Ballinger, who is available to help us with questions as well. Of course, the total challenge in eastern Kentucky, a challenge that has been embraced by Governor Beshear and the full administration, and that includes the Transportation Cabinet, it goes beyond these immediate issues of debris removal and infrastructure damage. An enormous part of the challenge is providing folks of the region, those affected in the region, a way to rebuild on land that's elevated enough to afford them a measure of security against future floods. That's going to be a legacy of this recovery mission and of this administration and of everyone involved in it through the legislative efforts as well. But for now, a lot of hard work lies ahead. And to paraphrase, it was Winston Churchill who said, "This is not the beginning of the end, but it may be the end of the beginning." So now, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Deputy State Highway Engineer John Moore. John?
John Moore, Deputy State Highway Engineer, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Just to add a little bit of background and some details, at the request of Kentucky Emergency Management at the early stages of the flood recovery, KYTC led the debris cleanup mission for both the state rights-of-way as well as local county and city rights-of-way. And overall, the right-of-way or the debris cleanup had three distinct phases. One, the right-of-way phase, the waterway phase, as well as the extended right-of-way phase, which we're involved in at this point. The right-of-way mission, as I mentioned, we collected debris that was on the right-of-way as well as debris that residents were able to push onto the right-of-way in the days following the disaster. As part of that effort, contractors collected almost 160,000 tons of debris. Shortly after that, the right-of-way phase kicked off. Due to the urgency of clearing out the waterways, again, Kentucky Emergency Management asked KYTC to help clean out the waterways to help for future rain events so that additional flooding did not occur. The goal of that, as I mentioned, was to remove the debris that choked the waterways and streams in eastern Kentucky. And the focus was on drainage structures and waterway blockages that would cause additional flooding. In coordination with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Division of Water, contractors removed 330,000 tons of debris from the waterways in the impacted area. Finally, this spring, there was indications that there was a lot of debris remaining that could not make its way out to the right-of-way because of either access issues or lack of available right-of-way in the area of the homes. So with coordination with FEMA and Kentucky Emergency Management, we began a final extended right-of-way. Some people, in some parlance, it may be considered a private property debris removal, where we collected debris that could not make it out to the right-of-way. This effort is ongoing, but is expected to finish up within the month. That's the background of what we've done as far as debris. I don't know if you want me to move into the highways update or if you want to pause there.
We will pause for just a moment. I was speaking to one of my magistrates yesterday, and he had a question, not knowing we were meeting today, but it fit the agenda, about some of the original trees still in some streams. Are there more dredging going on? You said we were in our final phase. Are there more dredging or removal? Is that still going on in those areas?
So the waterway mission to clean out the waterways, we concluded that at the end of the year last year. That was with coordination with the Corps of Engineers and Division of Water regarding the scope of the efforts, as well as using FEMA's eligibility to guide the scope of that mission.
So then that part is completed?
That's correct.
Okay. So one of the things we experienced, and it's brought on a whole new light, and maybe this segues us into the flood and the bridge repairs, but is issues from debris into what we call tile, where I come from, right? And we put tile in, we push dirt over it, and they drive across it. Pipe, big pipe. Yep. And when you got limbs that come through there and they're crossed up in every different way, all they do is create a dam, and everything behind that piece of tile backs up, right, and becomes a lake. And so we've had some smaller flooding, including this past weekend, especially in the Hindman area, that we're still seeing that debris that's catching in those tile, and it's backing up and causing some flooding. So I'm guessing because that we're beyond that 1 year flood, even though one could say it's linked to it, that's not going to be cleaned up and can't be covered under. Is that safe to say?
The nuance with all of Kentucky streams is every stream in Kentucky has some sort of vegetative debris load, and the goal of this effort was not to remove all the vegetative load. With every storm, there's additional vegetation that falls into the streams that causes additional issues. In the coordination of the experts that we have, I am in no means an expert as far as how much is too much or too little in the waterways. But using the experts that we did have, they concluded that at some point we had to stop, and the mechanisms that we were using, it was also causing damages to the streams. And so it was a balancing act between collecting as much debris out of the waterways as we could versus continuing to cause further harm to the streams and those efforts. Now, there are, especially with additional events, there's opportunities with NRCS, which the acronym, it's part of the Department of Agriculture. There's funding available through NRCS to help remove additional debris from the waterways that may be an avenue to pursue as well.
Okay. Senator Turner, you've got a question?
Yeah, and a comment. I'm not an expert either, but as my knowledge dealing with the EPA and everybody else, when you have the cover that's stopped up, I don't see any problem with taking an excavator and reaching in and getting that. What the dredging was going in and getting the muck and all that was in those from all of my counties up there, especially Letcher County. They did all that. But anytime there's a tree falls in, you said there was one of the magistrates asked about a tree falling in the branch or creek. There's no Corps of Engineers problem about taking that thing out. What they don't want you is taking a piece of equipment, getting down in there. And that's the basis of them. And I saw it all over there. And Fleming Neon, as bad as that was, as bad a place that you had. And the chairman was there, the commissioner was there. So I don't think that'd be a problem. Now you all can check on that for John, but I don't see that as a problem. Because the counties do it all the time with their equipment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Senator Higdon. Chairman Higdon. I'm sorry, Co-Chair Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And John, thank you and Secretary Gray. How much did we end up spending on I guess, debris cleanup? And was that general fund dollars or transportation dollars out of the and then I guess how much was federal dollars?
So altogether, it's estimate currently, since we still don't have all the bills in, we're looking at about $200 million with the debris cleanup, the disposal, as well as the monitoring efforts. As of right now, those dollars, those expenditures have been passed along to Kentucky Emergency Management. So they're not on Kentucky's or the Transportation Cabinet's budget. That's going to be a mixture ultimately of FEMA reimbursement as well as the EK Safe Fund that will cover the 25% match. And of course, the amount of each one of those is subject to eligibility determination by FEMA, which is we're just at the very beginning of that and is expected to be a very prolonged process.
Yeah. I was fortunate at the invitation of Secretary Gray to get to view the disaster area soon after it happened, and the debris in the waterways was very extensive. And in fact, I was shocked to see that a flood, the destruction area looked just like a tornado had been through. It was that type of just total destruction, and so it was. I know there was a lot of cleanup, and of course, and I know you don't want to comment now. I haven't read the whole article, but there was a not so flattering article this morning about Ashbret, and that some of their, I guess, tactics in billing. I don't. Have you seen anything on that, or I'd probably rather not comment because it just came out, but. I did feel that I need to mention that's on the horizon, that those questions.
Well, let me speak. I did see it, and we were of course familiar that the work was being done on that story because John and I both spoke to the reporters. We were very open and transparent about the process. But let's dial back to just almost a year ago, when that devastating flood occurred. 43 people perished. And let's just compare how tragic that was. You can't compare tragedies, but in Vermont and Pennsylvania this week, Pennsylvania, 5 people perished, souls were lost. Vermont, 2. And our flood, 43 souls were lost. The counties were devastated. They were searching for help. They were asking for help. They did not have the financial resources to support the mission to recover. And they asked us for help. And what I said then was, we have boots on the ground. We have these employees that all of you know in your districts, in these communities, in these counties. And we had more coming from all over the state to help. We also had the management talent and resources like John Moore to take on that mission, the contracting mission and the management mission. And I am very proud of the work that's been done, very proud of that work that's been done by so many people in the communities and elsewhere. And I think we have to look at all of this with a spirit, of course, of how can we improve, always. But these disasters that we've experienced are not normal. So we had to come at this with the resources and the talent that we had available. And that's exactly what we did. And I'm very proud of that, very proud of it.
Mr. Chairman, I will be very complimentary, Mr. Secretary, of what I saw the day that I was there.
You were with me 2 days after the event.
Yes, sir, and the magnitude of there was an army of Kentucky transportation logo vehicles, not asking any questions about if it was a county road or state road, just whatever it took to make sure that those folks had a way to mainly to get out at that point.
Right.
And then some of them to get back home. But and the cleanup effort, I mean, it was a monstrous job, and it needed to be done yesterday, and there was a sense of urgency. So I commend you for that effort, and I saw firsthand what you were up against.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions on this topic? Senator Turner.
I just want to make a comment. I worked hand in hand with Ashbret, and I haven't seen that article, but they had security people watching them. They had to cut their equipment off when it wasn't moving. I mean, FEMA had them covered up. We swapped out work with them where they couldn't go across something, and I had some here that needed cleaned up. Let them do that, and I went up there and cleaned that up just to get the place cleaned up. So now I don't know what the article says about them, but I met some of their staff and a lot of their employees, and we piled it up there and they hauled it off. I mean, I worked with them from August to when they left, when they took off to go to Florida. So, and you were there.
Yeah, I was there with you, Fleming Neon. Yes,
they
sir.
worked. I can't understand. I don't know what they've said bad about them, but they were diligent, working night, just like we were, hard. And they had people watch them sitting in cars. You couldn't do nothing wrong. And some of the stuff seemed crazy to me as a business person trying to get something done, but they said we have to follow that rule. So I don't know what the problem was. They were excellent working when I was there.
Thank you.
Very good. If there's no other questions, let's move on in. Don't you guys leave the table. Let's move on in to roads and bridges.
Yeah, John.
So, as Chairman Higdon mentioned, in the immediate aftermath of the flooding, our focus was restoring access, and as part of that was with the impact, especially to the waterways. The first 10 or 11 days was focused on our bridges to make sure they were safe to cross for the public. So with that, over we had inspectors come from around the state, including state and consultant inspectors, looking at 1,100 bridges throughout the impacted areas. Out of that, we identified concerns with 166 bridges. With that, the damages to those bridges ranged from approach damage to bridges that were absolutely washed out. Included in that were 34 that cut off access to haulers or roadways that was the only access to folks that lived back up that roadway. So that was our primary concern, was to restore access in whatever method we could. This is generally put in temporary crossings to shore up and then expedite the replacement because as you know, in eastern Kentucky, the rain's going to come again, and we needed a more permanent fix for that. Along with that, at the same time that we were working on those 34 critical locations, we identified 51 bridges that had a more moderate damages. Those we partnered with the local counties and cities to address those concerns. These are generally approach issues or tow wall issues that were more moderate scope that they could address. Out of the remaining, that left 115 bridges, including the 34 critical bridges, and out of those 115 that the Transportation Cabinet is delivering, 81 have been completed, and there's only 12 left that have not yet gone to contract, and those we're actively working to get those to contract as quickly as we can. Beyond the bridges, which is a critical aspect, the roadway damages that the transportation system endured, we identified around 500 distinct roadway damages that we've filed with FEMA or FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. Those range from landslides to roadway slips to a handful of locations where the roadway was washed out through a tile that had been backed up and the roadway had just washed out. I'm happy to say that all of those washouts have been fully restored. We are still working on the roadway slips, and unfortunately we'll work on those for a number of years to come because of the limited contractor capacity to work in that specialized activities. But all in all, this deep into the disaster, I just want to. We talked about our maintenance forces a bit ago. With such a devastating flood event, the limited nature of the damage to the state system is a testament to the day in and day out activities of our maintenance forces that are located in every county in the Commonwealth. Their day in, day out activities of cleaning ditches, making sure the tiles flow. That's the insurance that we take out on our roadways for these events. Happy to entertain any questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So if I understood correct, you say we have 12 bridges that are yet to be completed. Are we anticipating before the end of this current calendar year that we may be able to get to those?
These are 12 that have yet to go to contract.
Okay.
So we do. We're at the project development stage, trying to get the last right-of-way parcels bought in order to restore those. So we do anticipate those will be done this year, but that's not always completely in our control.
I understand. Thank you for that update. And let me say this: our state and our county roads and bridges got hit very hard up in our area. I spent many days with many hours in the day throughout that region during that time. And as one of the, maybe Senator Chairman Higdon said, you guys were everywhere. You were pitching in, and I understand sometimes we have to say, well, is this a county or is this a state issue? But this was just a people issue. And you jumped in, your folks shine. Now, there was other state agencies that shined too, but we're talking about transportation right now. Your all's folks shined up there in what I seen, and I was around them every day. They were working countless hours. They were getting the job done, and I'm thankful for all the work that you've did, that you've been there with us, even today. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary soon, and you're still there. You're working to get it and get things completed. And from somebody that's from the region, I appreciate all of you all and what you've done for us during all this time. Senator Higdon, I believe you have something.
Well, just when we talk about the bridges and Secretary Gray and James Ballinger, when we went up through there that day, substantial bridges were no longer there. Just one after another, after another, after another. And I think we talked to one county judge and talked about there was 30-some bridges in his county that were missing.
Harry.
And so it was a widespread destruction. And we talk about the crews from all over the state, the district engineers from all over the state were there. I'll tell you a quick story, Mr. Chairman. A few days after that, I was going to Hodgenville and I run across my district crew from Marion County out on the road, and as I got closer, I could tell it was the foreman of the bunch, and he was flagging. And I asked him if he got a promotion. He said, "I'm the only one left. Everybody else is in Eastern Kentucky." So it was a full scale mobilization, and like I said, it was impressive to see the number of the amount of state equipment in Eastern Kentucky just several days after the disaster. So again, a lot of good things were done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And of course, we were all grateful for all the volunteers and the citizens. And like Senator Turner was there in Fleming Dion one day when I went down, and so much like that. So thank you, sir.
Representative Branscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your work in this. I know we're spending a lot of money here on the build backs, and one question I have: I know a lot of these roads are probably being built back in floodplains. Are we doing anything either through engineering practices or rerouting of roads, which is probably a little bit more difficult to do, to mitigate this if or when, as you said, the rains come again?
I'm happy to say that a majority of the bridges that survived the flood, that just had minimum or moderate damages, were those that are on our inventory. Those are our over 20-foot bridges that we visit every 2 years at a minimum, and these are ones that we know how well they're built. We know their capacity to withstand flood events. Out of the 115 severely damaged bridges, about 70 of those were uninventoried bridges, ones that we did not have detailed information on. So, and part of those, we had a variety of bridges out there, including some that used old junked out cars as abutments, and so I would attest that the issue is not as severe as it appears, because the inventory structures held up very well, except when there's any structure that has a flow of debris coming through and puts that much lateral pressure on it is going to have trouble surviving. But by and large, the inspected bridges throughout eastern Kentucky handled the flood extraordinarily well.
I think we inspected over 1,100, isn't that right, John? 1,100 bridges were inspected within a week. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
It's incredible numbers
Josh.
when
Yeah.
you start thinking about it. The magnitude of 1,100 bridge inspections in 1 week. It's just unbelievable. Anyone else with any questions for them? If not, Mr. Ballinger, you got anything you want to add? I mean, have you heard anything? I always meet you with a smile from you, and want to give you the opportunity if you have anything to say.
Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today with the committee, and also I want to thank you guys for the positive comments and the acknowledgement of the state highway staff. Though they've worked so hard, as I was talking to John Moore and Secretary Gray earlier today, and as the 1-year anniversary of the flooding event is approaching us, and as we went on and took the tour with Senator Higdon, it was on the Friday after the flooding event occurred, though, and after a long career in transportation, I'd never seen anything like it before. And I knew that it was a major disaster, and I knew it was going to take a lot of partnerships and a lot of folks working together. And I just want to thank this group, this body, for the support, thank the counties, thank the Secretary for his leadership during this time. And there's been a lot of work done. There is still work to be accomplished and needs to be completed, though, but I just want to thank everyone for their support of our crew and our team, and just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ballinger. We appreciate each of you. Mr. Secretary, thank you.
You bet. You know, one thing, just as a footnote, there's so much work being underway with these high ground communities today as well, and the governor has been just rigorously on top of that, and so has so many other agencies in the administration. And I used the word gratifying earlier, but you know, it's very gratifying. It's also inspiring, because so much has to be done in order to create those opportunities and those communities. But that work, I've been in the construction, like Representative Branscombe, been in the construction business all my life, and I've rarely seen the kind of mobilization of talent that's coming together to design and create and secure and then construct these communities. And I know you all are all interested in it, and that work is very much underway.
Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Mr. Secretary. And I'm going to veer off topic and give a little latitude to Senator Yates. He's got an EV question for you before you get going.
And John Moore is the authority, and he just left me. Come on back up here, John. Never far away. Thank you. You're called the subject matter expert, SME.
Well, first of all, thank you,
Senator Yates. Yeah.
Thank you, guys, and I appreciate you guys entertaining this. This is a question that I get a lot in my district. It's something that I've talked about quite a bit over the past couple of years, and I saw that last week Ohio is the one of the first states to kind of lead and go ahead in the federal national electric vehicle infrastructure program, the NEVI money, and they went and disseminated that, and they had a procurement that kind of went out, and it looked like it's pretty fair. That kind of went out and had lots of partners come in place, and so I wanted to see where we were with that. That just see if we're going to do something similar where we have a lot of competition. Looks like they get good costs coming on that. I think just a couple of them got most of them, but it looked like they brought a lot of people to the table, which kept those down. So I wanted to see where we were with disseminating that. We had talked a whole lot about early on, us kind of putting our money where our mouth is too, with the legislators here. A lot of people invested into the electric vehicles. I knew they were talking about putting charging stations here and then working them down 64 to make sure they're in place so we can kind of lead. So I just wanted to get kind of an update on that, where we were with the procurement. And then the thoughts on the Tesla charging connectors. I know that congratulations kind of on us being one of the first ones with that, but if you kind of just give us an update. I've probably gotten maybe 15 requests in probably the past few weeks, so I thought while you were here, if we could maybe address that.
The reason you may have gotten a lot of requests is we have an active RFP on the street, and it's scheduled to conclude August 24th. And so very similar, we used Ohio's, we were familiar with Ohio's procurement, and we adapted it to Kentucky's unique aspects. So we're actively on the street with very similar dispersion throughout the state to try and to fill the interstates and parkways. Regarding the CCS versus NACS, the Tesla versus the Navy standard, the Navy requires CCS ports with Ford announcing their transition to NACS beginning in 2025. We included that in our RFP. We have received concerns from the industry regarding their ability to meet schedule on that. So we're looking into that and are looking to see how to respond to that based on information that they provide as well as other information as well. So.
Okay, and that, I think that's a lot of it because obviously with the plants here and the battery plants here, there's a lot of people, including myself, that have put in orders for some of the Fords and some of the local vehicles, and they want to make sure that we're going to be able to provide the charging stations available. And do you feel confident that I can return a yes, that that's something we'll be committed to?
There was one of the early directives that I received from both the governor as well as my secretary is that we need to assure that our charging stations are compliant with the batteries that are produced in Kentucky. So
that's what I wanted to hear.
Senator Yates, I would also refer you to last month's meeting materials online. We covered, and there is actually a PowerPoint by Mr. Moore gave us, and it's got all that information in there, so you'll have it in writing. So.
Just summary real quick, just a summary on where we are vis-a-vis compared to other states. We were among the top 10 to get our request for proposals, the RFPs, out. And we are very much on schedule today. So that's we're hoping. I'm finding some wood here to knock on, y'all, but John has said by the end of the year, right? You're hoping to have. Go ahead and say that. So.
Our goal is by the end of the year to have charters under construction.
Yep.
All right. Oh, thank you.
Are we good?
You're good, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your indulgence today for us. But we're not done with Jason yet. We're going to talk about truck rest area availability, and Jason, we'll turn the table over to you. Let's see.
All right, give me just a moment here and we will get our presentation loaded here. All right, and again, I'm Jason Sawala, Deputy State Highway Engineer for KYTC, and with us was our project manager for our truck parking assessment and action plan update. Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind introduce yourself.
Jeremy Edgeworth, Freight Rail and Waterways Coordinator for the Transportation Cabinet.
All right, and so for anybody who might not be familiar, what we're talking about here is the challenge of ensuring that there is adequate facilities available, be those public or private, for commercial vehicle operators to be able to find places to rest that are safe and that are not parked along the shoulders of our highways and things like that. And so, you know, I've always heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so I'll just show a couple of these photos. The one on the left is one of our rest areas that has a truck parking component, but you can see up toward the top of the picture there that at night folks are parked all the way back up through that ramp. And if we looked at the exit ramp, you would probably see a similar picture on that evening as you do on many evenings. And from the driver's perspective, if you look here at the picture on the right, you can see that often these commercial vehicle operators are stopping just over the white line in any place that they can find once they've run out of hours for the day and are trying to find a safe place to park. And that obviously makes a challenging situation for not only them, but also for the traveling public as they travel through there. And so when we look at what it is that our truck parking study did, we were trying to figure out where are they parking now, what types of needs do they have, what types of unmet capacity is there. And a lot of folks ask us if this is something that continues to be a problem with just-in-time delivery concepts from industries, and the answer is yes. As we look at that just-in-time delivery concept, folks need places to stage and they need places to rest when they're waiting to go and pick things up or drop things off. And so, there's a lot of things about this that are both wrapped up in the public space and the private space. And so, what our truck parking study did was over the span of about 18 months plus or minus. We took these 10 steps, if you will, to try to figure out what the opportunity was for truck parking improvements, again, with the goal of improving safety on the system. And so, the first place we always start is that we're going to collect data. We're going to look at, existing utilization, things like that. Measure existing truck parking supply, and I'll get into that in just a couple minutes. And then, one of the things about it is once you know how much supply there is, you need to figure out what the actual demand is for that. And, as folks know, if you're traveling out there around our state, you'll see that trucks don't only run at certain times of the day. Obviously, there's commerce moving over our highway network at all hours of the day and night. And so when you think about it, this isn't just a daytime thing, or you can't just only see it at night. There's a lot that goes into that, and so we looked at trying to figure that out as well. Identify and prioritize truck parking needs. That's obviously one of the primary goals here. One of the things I want to call attention to on the right of this slide is in green, where we did some public involvement, and we talked to members of the commercial motor vehicle community, trying to figure out things that are important to them, what types of challenges they have, and did that in a way that, as I've talked to folks around the country, we had folks that were very appreciative of Jeremy's approach in doing that, because that's not always something that's asked of those commercial motor vehicle operators as we look at these items from a truck parking perspective. Identify places where we might be able to do some more truck parking on the public right-of-way. Now, as I will get into in a minute, there's obviously public solutions for this, and there's private solutions for this, and figuring out what the optimal way to work together with folks was part of what we were doing here too. We wanted to prioritize those expansions and look at innovative solutions. So I know that there's been questions from various folks about has anybody seen the signs on the side of the highway, coming up into a lot of times it might be a major urban area that says, truck parking availability, and it might have 2 or 3 different spots listed where truck parking might be available. That was a part of a regional pilot we did with actually the Mid-Atlantic states, looking at the opportunities for truck parking and to be able to communicate about that. Building all the parking in the world, if folks don't know where it is or how to access it, doesn't really solve a problem. So we need to make sure not only that capacity is available, but also that people know how to interact with it and where it is and how to get to it. Looking at parking expansion designs, we went out and talked to folks again. One of the things that you saw on the previous slide is that the truck driving community, they're not shy. If they see a spot where they think they might be able to park, they're going to park there. That's one of the things that And so as we talked to him about opportunities that we had at the rest areas and at the weigh stations, we sought their input as well. And then all of that culminated in the development of a final action plan and report. So quickly, just over 7,500 truck parking spaces, okay? And I want to be clear that this is both public and private, okay? So KYTC maintains approximately 28 of those types of locations. And again, this is primarily rest areas and weigh stations that have approximately 1,050 spaces. Over half of the identified truck parking spaces are along I-65 and I-75. Those having more than 2,000 spaces along those respective corridors each. And the private sector provides more than 80% of Kentucky truck parking with a capacity of just over 6,000 spaces. And so this is various types of things, but you can think about things like pilots and Flying J's and other manufacturers of in truck stops and things like that. That provide not only parking, but other ancillary services that are needed. When we went out and did that public involvement, one of the things that we heard from the CMV community was that there's certainly opportunities to improve truck parking, but that really those other amenities are things that they also need in order to do their job safely. And so this slide here is a little bit of an eye chart, but what I really want to call your attention to is that between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. at this particular set of rest areas, and I believe that these were actually in northern Kentucky, we were showing either at or above capacity from that 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. Time frame. And when we look at that from a 3-year trend perspective, that also showed increasing need, not decreasing need. And so as we continue to look at this, we wanted to make sure, looking back at data and looking at historical items, that we were able to confirm that this was not kind of a blip, but it was a trend that still needed to be addressed. This map, which is in here mostly for your reference, but I'll talk about it for just a second, just shows in these purple circles kind of show a magnitude of unmet capacity needs in our state. And you can see that just about every one of these is along an interstate or a parkway. Okay, and so as you look at that, the opportunity here again is for us to be working in a meaningful way to help provide these types of truck parking facilities, not necessarily only on the public rights of way, but also in partnership with private folks as well. And so, that action plan that I mentioned on the first slide prioritized a list of improvements on the public rights of way, and that's something that we have as a part of our final report. There's 27 conceptual designs in that report as well, looking at how we might actually go about making some of those improvements. 10 of those sites have 15%, if you will, design, which means that we went a little bit further with those to be able to do just a little bit beyond the proof of concept. The schedule was developed, and when I say schedule, please take that not to mean like how many days it'll take, but in general, how long would this take in terms of years, construction seasons, that type of thing. To look at overall how long it might take to implement some of those recommendations. Looked at technology recommendations again as capacity changes, both on the public side and the private side. Ensuring that folks have access to that information is important. What those funding options might be, and then partnership opportunities as well. And we sent this over last week, and I wanted to make sure, just for reference, that there was a kind of a summary of what those public sector side items were, and so there's a look at what the recommendations of that study were on that last slide there. But beyond that, Jeremy and I are happy to take questions, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to come over and speak with you today on this important topic.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Edgeworth, you have anything to add before we go to questions?
No, it's obviously a very important issue, and as Jason noted, we have about 9,000 trucks per night that are looking for a place to park, and where we only have 7,500 spaces throughout the state, there's 1,500 drivers that are looking for a place to park. And while this is not necessarily only a state problem, what we found is that when trucks, the private facilities are overloaded, that's when they seem to run onto our ramps and our shoulders, and it becomes a public problem. We admit we as a cabinet will never solve this problem. It's going to require a collaborative approach, but what the study was looking at is what can we as a cabinet do with the resources we have to help address the truck parking shortage.
Okay, thank you. Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Jason. And in this past budget we did, I think there was 2 or 3 different locations where we spent $1 million to expand truck parking at some of the rest areas. And how many was that? Do you remember right off? I think it was 2, maybe 3.
To ensure that I get you accurate information, let me get back to you on that, as well as with the status of those items.
I guess the point was we've already been trying to do this, and this is a big push on the federal level too. And I know that there are grants available for this, and I'm sure that you are actively seeking some of those.
Yeah, so there has been the announcement and the conceptual looking at additional grants specifically for truck parking, and so those are things that we're evaluating as we look at the rest of the transportation system's needs as well. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I know that we all bring our different hats on here, and so year after year I have horrific accident cases, motor vehicle accidents, for the truck drivers that park on the side of the ramps where the trailer will hang over that white line. When an individual comes in, they're merging there. By the time the merge happens, it's too late and winds up, just horrific injuries after injuries where they do that. And a lot of times they don't have the cones set up back. Earlier we talked about enforcement on that. Is there anything that are we doing to enforce that, to discourage people passing through Kentucky that are otherwise killing our constituents?
We've had discussions with our law enforcement community. They've been great partners with us on this study. And one of the things that they noted is that they want to run the drivers off out of these spaces, but they realize, where are they going to go? The drivers don't have any place for them to go. And so the hope is if we can add capacity in these areas, that will give the law enforcement officers the opportunity to say, hey, there's available spaces here, move into those, rather than just parking on our shoulders. They want, in discussions we've had, they want to enforce those, but their hands are tied as well because the drivers have no place to go.
Follow up. So my understanding here, it's against the law. We know that it kills constituents. Mm-hmm. So they have the option of either violating their code because they went too far by driving, or putting people in danger. So I hope, as I said here today, that they're not enforcing it because they think they don't have somewhere else to go because they need to move on down the road. I say that as I think of 2 individuals who lost their life. So I do hope that's something we will enforce.
And certainly on the transportation cabinet's end, I've been in front of this committee numerous times talking about preventing serious injuries and deaths across all of our roadway users, and so that's obviously something that's important to us. And as we've discussed with our law enforcement partners, they are out there actively doing a lot of these things, and this is the feedback that they are receiving. And so Jeremy, I think, was just trying to explain the magnitude of the challenge is that if they go and knock on a window, obviously those folks they get up and they go somewhere else. We want to try and ensure that there's a space, a place where they're not going to be putting themselves or those constituents in danger to do that. So,
but we are asking they write those tickets, correct?
We work with local law enforcement on enforcement of all the transportation safety laws. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Thomas.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this. I'm probably one of the few people on the committee that actually has my Class A CDL and have had to drive these things all over the country and stuff. And truck parking it's a nightmare. Thank goodness for sometimes Walmarts or something like that you can, they don't mind you parking there, or they might. They just don't say anything. But it is true. You basically, if you're going to get in one of those Flying J's or Pilots or Loves or something like that truck stop, you better 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 to 4:30, And that's tough on drivers because I know myself, I might have a delivery. I was in furniture, and it would be that next morning, and you can't. So sometimes, I'm glad I didn't know Senator Yates then, and he didn't sue me for parking on a ramp. But I hate to say I might have done that once or twice there, but because there aren't any options. And the problem too has gotten a little bit worse, I think, since we've switched from paper logs to the ELTs that actually will pinpoint you to the minute and the second. And that makes it tough on these drivers when suddenly they know they got 30 minutes left. They're on a long strip with nowhere to park, and you just do your best. And so saying that, some of these ramps, and I've had some constituents reach out to me, some ramps do not have signs, and then others I strictly see no parking up and down there, and I'm sure it's for the trucks. Is that so? It is illegal to park on any off ramps and on ramps, whether the sign's there or not. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then I've on the trucking side, they sit there. Well, if they could park there, it'd be nice to put trash cans out, because I think some of the complaints from my constituents is the trash that's left there, not so much the safety side of it, especially on the ramps that as you're getting back on. I think they're a little safer than it's the off ramp when you're doing 70, you have to slow down to 35 and there's trucks there. That's the danger. And but thank y'all for your report, and I hope it has both aspects of it. We can find out something that we can help these guys and girls.
That's it. All right, no further questions. Great job, guys. We appreciate the information. Next up and last on our agenda, we have one regulation today to review dealing with motorcycle safety education program. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Huber, are you guys here? And welcome. And if you all would please state your name for the record and give us a brief description of the regulation, and we'll see if there's any questions that the members might have.
I'm John Johnson with the
It's on.
green light. Thank you. John Johnson, Office of Legal Services, Transportation Cabinet. I'm sorry.
Do you?
How about that?
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm John Johnson, Assistant General Counsel, Office of Legal Services, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. This regulation today, it originated in the Justice Cabinet. It started the migration over to transportation last year. We recodified it to make it one of our own. And we also wanted to incorporate some changes that were necessitated by House Bill 125. And that came from the 2021 regular session. One of the problems with the regulation as it existed, we had a website that was non-functional. We wanted to make changes to the regulation to incorporate a proper procedure for motorcycle training to occur. So with that being said, that's my brief summary. I'll turn it over to the subject matter expert, Mr. Jay Huber.
I'm Jay Huber. I'm the program administrator for the Rider Education Committee or program, here in the state. As Mr. Johnson said, it's primarily due to some legislative changes that have happened over the years, as well as just some procedural changes that to run the program very effectively. Which, by the way, just to give you an update, we had our banner year this last year. So over the fiscal year 23, had 4,091 students through the program, the most that's ever been through the program since its inception back in '92.
Very good. And the members have any questions? Appreciate you all. Seeing none, let the record show that the regulation has been reviewed. That was pretty simple, right? We thank you, gentlemen. Let me give a quick reminder before we adjourn to the members that are still here with us that we have a quick turnaround on our next committee meeting. It will be on Tuesday, August the 1st. So today's the 18th. It's going to be 2 weeks from today at 1 p.m. in this same room. So nothing.